The wind was bitter, cutting through the small graveyard like it had a vendetta. I stood there, numb, watching as they lowered my father into the ground, the casket almost swallowed by the earth. The sounds of the ceremony blurred together, distant whispers and the soft murmur of the officiant's voice, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. Nothing felt real. My father, the man who had been the backbone of our small town, the compassionate doctor everyone relied on, was gone. And there I was, clinging to the memory of his presence, feeling the emptiness settle in my chest. I had to bury him. I had to. But it wasn't right. It wasn't fair. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. My name is Emma. I'm 36 and I live in a small town in Oregon. I'm a veterinarian, and my father had been my greatest support since my mother died when I was a teenager. And now here I was burying him. Alone. I glanced to my side, searching for some form of comfort, some sign that my husband, Jason, was still here with me. But he was busy, preoccupied. His phone buzzed, and he was on it almost immediately, walking a few steps away, his eyes glued to the screen. I could see the way his fingers moved quickly, like there was something more important than this moment. The moment where I said goodbye to my father. He'd been like this all day, barely meeting my eyes, too consumed with business calls and logistics to pay any real attention to what was happening. Jason, the architect with big dreams, always had something to plan for. Always had something on his mind. Even today at my father's funeral, he couldn't stop thinking about his next project. His phone rang again, and I saw him step away even farther, muttering something to the person on the other end. I turned my gaze back to the grave, feeling my throat tighten. I thought about the way my father used to hold me close when I was little, the way he always knew how to comfort me when things felt out of control. He was a quiet man, but his presence was a reassurance in itself. He had been my rock and now he was gone. I heard the click of high heels against the gravel, and then a voice, sharp, dismissive, cut through the quiet. Well, my mother-in-law, Clarice, said, standing at the edge of the cemetery, wearing dark sunglasses, despite the gray overcast sky. I suppose it's just as well. The man had a good run. Her tone was so cold, so clinical, it made my stomach twist. She was late as usual, and she barely acknowledged me as she walked past, heading straight for Jason, who was still on his phone. I swallowed back the wave of frustration threatening to boil over. Clarice hadn't been there when my mother was dying. She hadn't been there for anything. And now, she was here, playing some sort of role. The picture-perfect mother-in-law. I turned away, biting my lip, forcing myself to focus on the service. Minutes passed. The ceremony ended, and people began to gather their things, chattering in low voices. It didn't matter that my father was dead. They would move on. They always did. Jason finally hung up and walked over to me, his face drawn but distant. "You okay?" he asked, his voice flat. I nodded stiffly, though I wasn't sure I was. "I think we can start getting everything sorted now," Jason said, glancing around as if making a mental checklist. "I'll take care of the estate stuff. I've got a meeting with the lawyer next week to go over the details. Shouldn't take long." The words hit me like a slap. Sorting things out. That's all he was thinking about. Like my father's death was just another task to manage. I stared at him for a long moment, trying to figure out if he truly didn't see it, or if he just didn't care. "You're already thinking about the next steps?" I asked, my voice a little sharper than I meant. He gave a small, apologetic shrug. "I'm just trying to get things in order, Em. You know how it is. We've got to stay practical." Practical? My father had just died, and he was talking about getting things in order. My throat burned, and I felt the sting of tears rising, but I refused to let them fall. "Jason," I said, forcing the words out. "You're not even here." He blinked at me, confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean?" I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak, and started walking away, needing space. As I moved, I could hear Clarice's voice in the background, her shrill laughter ringing out, like everything was normal again. I felt like I was drowning in the distance between us. The distance between me and Jason, between me and my family. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized. This wasn't just about my father. There was something else beneath the surface. Something was breaking, and I had no idea how to fix it. A few days had passed since my father's funeral. The house felt different, emptier. Even with the small-town bustle of Oregon continuing outside, the silence inside my father's home was overwhelming. Jason had been preoccupied with calls for most of the days, and Clarice, predictably, had already made herself scarce. It was just me, sifting through my father's things, trying to make sense of the wreckage left behind. That afternoon, I drove to the law office, the one my father had worked with for years. The place looked sterile and cold, like a relic from another time. I stepped inside, holding my breath, dreading the next step. The lawyer, Mr. Hollingsworth, greeted me with his usual professional smile, and ushered me into the conference room. He had been my father's lawyer since I could remember. He didn't show any surprise at my presence. He was just here to do his job. But as I sat down across from him, I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Something was off. My father had always been a quiet man, but I knew he'd made plans. I just hadn't expected anything like this. "I trust you're doing well, Emma," Mr. Hollingsworth said, his voice smooth and measured. I nodded stiffly. "I'm managing. Just here to get the paperwork." He pushed a manila folder across the table toward me. "This is your father's will and estate paperwork. I'm sure you're already familiar with the basics." I reached for the folder with shaking hands. The words "last will and testament" on the top of the document blurred in front of my eyes. I opened it slowly, scanning the pages. The words ran together: trust accounts, properties, assets. And then I saw it. The amount. My heart skipped a beat. "It says here," I whispered, almost afraid to believe it, "$31 million?" Mr. Hollingsworth nodded. "Yes. Your father established quite a few charitable trusts over the years, but after debts and other considerations, this is the total value of his estate." I stared at the number in disbelief. It was more than I had ever imagined, more than I thought my father could have left behind. My throat was dry, and I could barely process it. My mind raced. He'd always been modest, lived simply. How had this all happened without me knowing? "Your father was very thoughtful about his legacy," Mr. Hollingsworth continued, adjusting his glasses. "There's also a historic house in town, along with several buildings tied to the family clinic. They've been passed down for generations." My fingers numbly flipped through the pages, my thoughts swirling. "And the trust?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "It's to ensure the clinic remains a resource for the town," he explained, "and it provides you with a steady income. It's irrevocable. This is not something you can easily modify or dissolve." I swallowed hard, trying to process. This was all so overwhelming. My father had been a doctor, but he had always been more focused on helping people than making money. And now this enormous inheritance was suddenly mine. "Your father, in his will, also made it clear that this estate, this house, and the clinic are to be maintained in the spirit of the town's healthcare." Mr. Hollingsworth paused. He was adamant about keeping everything intact. I looked at him, my mind spinning. A part of me wanted to ask questions about the clinic, about the house, but the only thing I could think about was the weight of all of this. Jason's face, his preoccupation with getting things sorted, suddenly made more sense. "You'll be fine, Emma," Mr. Hollingsworth added, trying to reassure me. "I'll help you through the process. But as you can imagine, this estate is large and will require your attention." "I understand," I said mechanically. "Thank you." I stood up, dazed. My hands gripped the papers as if they could anchor me to reality. But I didn't feel grounded at all. "You should probably take some time to think about your next steps," Mr. Hollingsworth said, standing with me. "I'm here to guide you through it all, whenever you're ready." I nodded without really hearing him. I was already thinking about Jason. How he would react to all of this. Would he be happy? Or would he just want to get to work on renovations, on selling off parts of the estate? My father had always done things his own way. He never relied on anyone, even his own family, when it came to this. But Jason? He would want to fix everything, take charge. I could already hear his voice in my head. I left the office and got into my car, feeling the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. I needed to talk to Jason. I needed to tell him about the money, about the clinic, about the house. But the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if I could trust him. Why did I feel so uneasy? As I drove back to the house, a part of me was already dreading the conversation ahead. Would Jason treat this inheritance as an opportunity? Or would he just see it as something to manage, a way to push his own ambitions forward? I tried to shake the thought, but it lingered in my mind. Jason would never understand what this meant to me. This wasn't just about money. It was about honoring my father's legacy, keeping the family clinic alive. This was about something bigger than any financial gain. But I didn't know if I could make him see that. When I walked through the door of the house, Jason was sitting at the kitchen table, his phone still glued to his hand. I talked to the lawyer, I said, trying to sound calm. Good, Jason muttered, not looking up. What did he say? I hesitated before speaking. I inherited everything, Jason. The house, the clinic, the trust. All of it. Jason finally looked up, his face momentarily frozen. His lips parted, but then he quickly masked his surprise with a business-like expression. Everything, he echoed, his voice smooth. Well, that's a lot to sort through. I guess we should start with the renovations, yeah? Renovations. He wasn't listening. Not really. I felt a tightening in my chest as I realized. He was already thinking about how to fix everything, how to make it profitable. I fought back a wave of frustration. Jason, this isn't just about renovations. This is about keeping my father's legacy intact. It's about preserving the clinic, the house, everything he worked for. He paused, his gaze turning calculating. Of course, Em. But we've got to make sure it all works, you know? We can't let things fall apart. I bit my lip, staring at him. It felt like a wall was building between us. He didn't understand. And part of me wondered if he ever would. I'm not sure you get it, Jason, I said quietly. This isn't just a business deal. It's my family. He gave a small nod, but his eyes were already drifting back to the screen of his phone. I'll get started on the details then, he said, his voice distant. The knot in my chest tightened. He wasn't getting it. Not yet. But he would. The days after my conversation with Jason felt like they were dragging on. I didn't know how to feel anymore. The weight of the inheritance was suffocating. But the way Jason was acting made it all feel so hollow. Every time I looked at him, I wondered if he saw me as his partner, or as just a stepping stone to whatever project he was obsessed with next. That evening, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to confront him about everything, about how he was handling the inheritance, and about his behavior since my father's death. Jason was sitting on the couch, tapping away on his laptop. The glow from the screen lit up his face in the dim light of the living room. I took a deep breath, my thoughts racing, and walked into the room. Jason, we need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the tension building in my chest. He looked up at me for a brief second before returning his attention to the screen. Can it wait? I'm trying to finish this proposal. No, it can't wait, I replied, walking over to the couch and sitting down next to him. Jason, this thing with my father's estate, it's not just about money. It's about honoring him, honoring what he built. I need you to understand that. Jason sighed, closing the laptop and turning to face me. His expression was unreadable. I do understand, Emma, but we need to be realistic. The house, the clinic, the trust, it's a lot. We can't just let it sit there, right? We need to figure out how to make it work for us. His words felt like a slap. My stomach twisted. He was already thinking about how to make it work for us. Not for me. Not for my father. Not for the town that depended on the clinic. That's not what I'm talking about, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm talking about the bigger picture here. This is my father's legacy, Jason. Not a business opportunity. He wasn't looking for a way to make money off this. He built this clinic because it mattered, because people depended on it. It's not about profit. Jason leaned back against the couch, his expression hardening. Emma, I'm not saying it's just about profit. But if we don't take this seriously, we'll end up losing everything. We need to modernize, renovate, make sure the clinic's operating at full capacity. This is the reality of it. I could feel my blood starting to boil. Why is it always about making things bigger, better? Jason, I'm not asking for a renovation. I'm asking for you to see it for what it is, my father's work. He built it to help people, not to be torn down and turned into some business venture. You're not hearing me. Jason's eyes flicked with annoyance. I hear you just fine, Emma. But I think you're getting a little emotional about all this. Your father's gone now. We need to be practical. You've got a lot of decisions to make, and you're letting your grief cloud your judgment. I froze, stunned. It was like a slap in the face. My grief? I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Are you seriously saying that? Because I'm trying to protect what's left of my father's life's work. You're calling it grief? You think I'm not being practical? Jason's face twisted into something that almost looked like frustration, though I could see the faintest hint of superiority in his eyes. Emma, I'm trying to help you here. But you're being stubborn. You don't want to see things the way they need to be seen. I'm just trying to make sure we don't lose everything, like we're some kind of charity case. I stood up abruptly, my heart racing in my chest. I'm not a charity case, Jason. This is not about losing everything. This is about preserving something that mattered to my father. Something that was important to this town. But it's clear you don't care about that. You just care about what you can fix, what you can control. Jason's gaze turned colder, more calculating. I care about making sure you don't lose everything. We're in this together, Emma, and I'm not going to stand by and watch you throw this all away out of some misguided loyalty to your father. I could feel my throat tightening. He didn't get it. He didn't understand what this was about. You don't get it, I said through gritted teeth. This isn't about losing everything, Jason. It's about keeping what was built. But all you see is the dollar signs. The clinic, the house, the trust. It's all just another project to you. Jason didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood up and began pacing in the small living room, muttering under his breath. I'm just trying to protect you, Emma. This inheritance, it's overwhelming. You don't even know what you're dealing with. I know what I'm dealing with. I shot back, feeling a surge of anger. What I'm dealing with is you. The way you've been acting like this whole thing is just a business deal. The way you're more concerned about getting things sorted than actually preserving what matters. Jason stopped pacing and turned toward me, his eyes narrowing. Emma, if you're not careful, you're going to ruin this. You're going to throw away everything your father worked for. All because you can't separate your emotions from reality. The words hit me like a punch. I stepped back, feeling the sting of betrayal. You really think I don't care about this, don't you? You think this is just about emotion. But you're wrong. You're so wrong, Jason. His eyes flickered with something, disappointment maybe. But I couldn't tell. I think you're being unrealistic, and I think you're letting your grief get in the way. You can't run a business based on nostalgia. You need to think practically. I felt my heart crack as the realization settled in. Jason was never going to get it. I had married him, thinking we could build something together, but now I saw what I had failed to see before. He didn't care about what I cared about. This wasn't just about my father's legacy. It was about his own ambition, his need to control, to make everything fit into his world. I need space, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need to think. Jason didn't reply, but his eyes followed me as I walked away. I could feel the walls between us growing taller with every step I took. And for the first time, I realized I was alone in this. I left the room and went upstairs, closing the door behind me. The weight of everything crashed down. It wasn't just the estate or the money or the clinic. It was Jason. It was us. It was everything I thought we were building together, but now I wasn't sure what was left. It felt like I was standing on the edge, looking down at a canyon that had opened up between us. And I wasn't sure how to cross it anymore. I couldn't sleep that night. The house felt so quiet, and every time I closed my eyes, Jason's words echoed in my mind, sharper than I wanted them to be. He didn't get it. He didn't get me. He didn't get what this was all about. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back in waves. Jason's cold practicality, his obsession with getting things sorted, the way he seemed so comfortable moving forward with things, without understanding the weight of what my father had left behind. The next morning, as the early light crept into the room, I knew something had to change. I couldn't let this go. Not anymore. I got up and went into my father's study, which felt more like a museum now. It was strange how his things, his books, his desk, even the worn leather chair where he'd sat to write prescriptions, now felt foreign to me. I ran my fingers over the edge of the desk, feeling the ghosts of him there. I had to protect what was left, and if Jason wasn't going to help me, then I had to take matters into my own hands. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, a woman named Veronica. She'd been my father's attorney for years, and I trusted her more than anyone else. "Emma," she answered on the third ring. "How are you holding up?" I forced a smile. "I'm managing. Listen, I need to take some steps to protect the estate. I want to make sure nothing gets taken or destroyed while I figure out the next steps. Could you recommend some security options? I need cameras, the works." Veronica hesitated for a moment. "Emma, are you sure? You can't undo things once they're done. And things are delicate right now, if your husband's involved in these decisions." I didn't let her finish. "Jason's involved, yes, but I need to do this, Veronica. My father's legacy is at risk, and I can't just wait around while someone else makes decisions. I need to know it's safe. Please, can you help me with this?" There was a pause. "I'll get you in touch with someone. You're not alone in this. I'll make sure you're covered." I hung up the phone, already feeling the weight of the decision start to settle in. But it was the right thing to do. I wasn't going to let this slip through my fingers. Not because Jason wanted to modernize everything, or because Clarice had her own idea of what the clinic and house should be. This wasn't just about the money. It never had been. The next morning, I met with a security company that Veronica recommended. They were discreet, efficient, and understood the delicate nature of the situation. They installed cameras at key spots in the house and around the clinic. Nothing overt, nothing that would draw attention, but enough to keep an eye on everything, especially with Jason's increasing obsession with renovations and changes. By the time they left, I felt a strange sense of relief. At least now I knew I could monitor things. But there was still so much more to figure out, especially when it came to Jason. I needed to be prepared for what was coming next. Later that week, after a few more tense conversations with Jason about plans, I installed a more personal strategy. I bought a small recorder and placed it discreetly in the living room. Jason and I had started having conversations about my father's estate, and I knew he'd try to talk circles around me. He wasn't going to make this easy. It was a quiet night when I set it up, careful to tuck the device under a small decorative vase on the coffee table, just out of sight. The plan was simple: collect information. As Jason became more frustrated with my reluctance to sell, change, or fix the house and clinic, I needed to make sure I had a record of every conversation. It wasn't about being underhanded. It was about protecting myself. I had no idea what lengths Jason and Clarice would go to, but I wouldn't leave myself vulnerable again. A few days later, I got the first bit of confirmation that my instincts were right. Jason was on the phone late one night, pacing in the kitchen. He was speaking to his business partner, someone named Greg, and I overheard snippets of the conversation as I walked past. "It's all in place," Jason said. "She won't go for the sale, but the clinic is an asset. We can push her into it. We'll get the clinic and the house and flip them for a profit. Emma doesn't know how to handle this. She's emotional. All I need is for her to sign the paperwork, and I'll take care of the rest." My heart sank. I stopped dead in my tracks, listening, my hands clenched into fists. They were planning to sell my father's clinic, his legacy, the one thing that meant more to me than anything else. I had to stop it. I waited until Jason went to bed that night, and I slipped into the living room. I pulled the small recorder from under the vase, rewound it, and listened. The words Jason spoke were like daggers, calculated, cold, full of the confidence that he could manipulate me into going along with his plans. But the more I listened, the more I understood. Jason wasn't just after the clinic for the sake of the money. He was after everything. He wanted to control it all. He had been planning this from the moment my father passed, and I had been too distracted by my own grief to see it. I knew then what I had to do. I reached out to Veronica again the next day and scheduled a meeting with her. I needed legal advice and fast. The evidence was clear, and I wasn't going to let Jason walk all over me, especially when it came to my father's hard work. When I met with Veronica, I showed her the recording. She listened, her face hardening with each word. This is enough to prove intent, she said carefully, her voice low. If you're ready to move forward, Emma, we can use this as leverage. You have the power to stop this. I felt a surge of clarity in that moment. It wasn't just about protecting the clinic or the house anymore. It was about making sure Jason couldn't manipulate me any longer. I had allowed myself to trust him, but I knew now. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a pawn. I want to start the process, I said, my voice firm. I want to move forward with legal separation. Veronica nodded. You're doing the right thing. We'll make sure everything is documented. And we'll start getting the paperwork ready. I felt a weight lift from my chest, replaced by something else, determination. I wasn't going to let anyone take away what my father had worked so hard for. And I wasn't going to let Jason gaslight me into believing that I was the one in the wrong. I walked out of the lawyer's office with a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer just a grieving daughter trying to keep her family's business alive. I was a woman who had a legacy to protect, and nothing would stand in my way. A week had passed since I met with Veronica, and the gears of my plan were slowly but surely starting to turn. Every day felt heavier, the tension between Jason and me growing with each passing hour. I could feel the cracks in our marriage deepening. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about trust, or the lack of it. Jason was still obsessed with the idea of getting things sorted, but I could tell the frustration was starting to show in his demeanor. He'd ask more questions about the estate, the trust, the properties, but it was all in the same tone. Like it was a business deal, like I was a client rather than his wife. I had become a ghost in our own home. Then, one evening, after a particularly silent dinner, where we barely exchanged more than a few words, Jason shifted. The change was subtle at first, just a small flicker of something that resembled concern in his eyes. Emma, he said softly, his voice almost pleading. I know things have been tense between us lately. I've been distracted. But I want to fix things. I want us to move forward. Let's put all of this behind us, okay? His words hung in the air, and for a second, I felt the tiniest spark of hope. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that he could see how much this meant to me. That he could understand my need to honor my father's legacy. Maybe he was finally seeing it the way I did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He'd been too focused on control, on the sale of the estate, on the practical side of things. Was this a real change in him? Or was it just another tactic, another way to manipulate me into thinking he was on my side? I stared at him for a long moment. My heart caught between the desire for resolution and the nagging doubt in the pit of my stomach. I don't know if I can just let everything go, Jason, I said, my voice shaking slightly. This is about more than just you and me. This is about my father's life's work. I'm not ready to just move on. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I get that, Emma. I do. But this isn't helping us either. We can't keep fighting over this. I'm doing everything I can to make sure everything works out for us for our future. His words should have been comforting. They should have been a relief. But they didn't feel that way. They felt hollow. The look in his eyes wasn't full of genuine understanding. It was full of something else, something cold, calculating. He was still thinking about the estate, the money. But he didn't see it the way I did. Jason, this isn't about the future. This is about the past, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. It's about what my father built. About honoring that. He moved closer to me, his tone softening. I know. But we're in this together, okay? I've been trying to make this work, Em. Let me show you. We'll get through this. Together. You can trust me. Trust him? The words bounced around in my head like they didn't belong. My mind raced back to everything that had happened. The subtle manipulations. The way he tried to control every decision without consulting me. The way he dismissed my grief like it was an obstacle rather than an emotion I had every right to feel. I'm not sure I can, I whispered, more to myself than to him. You've been so focused on fixing things, but I don't think you understand what's at stake. Jason stood still for a moment, looking at me like he was considering my words, trying to read between the lines. I could see the frustration beginning to bubble under his calm exterior. Emma, I'm trying. I'm really trying. We've been through a lot, and we're stronger than this. I know I haven't always done things right, but I want to make it right. I'm sorry. His apology should have been enough to make me feel better, but it didn't. It felt rehearsed, too convenient. Like he was just saying the words because he knew I needed to hear them, not because he truly understood why I was hurting. He moved closer, placing a hand on my arm, his touch gentle. Let's go away for the weekend, just the two of us. We'll get away from all of this, get some perspective. You and me, Emma. No more distractions. No more business, no more estate stuff. Just us. I froze, my eyes flicking to his. It sounded so perfect. A way to escape the tension. To just breathe for a moment. But as much as I wanted to say yes, the doubt gnawed at me. I wasn't sure if I could trust him, not yet. But his face was soft, almost pleading now. And I wanted to believe that he meant it. That he truly wanted to repair what we had. Okay, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop myself. Maybe that's a good idea. We'll go. Just for the weekend. Jason's smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. He was too relieved, too eager for it to be over. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't trying to reconcile. He was trying to get me to let my guard down, to ease the tension so he could move forward with his plan. I nodded, but inside, I was already preparing myself. I would go on that trip, yes. But I wasn't going to let my guard down. I would continue to protect the estate, the legacy, everything my father had built. I couldn't afford to trust Jason just yet. I couldn't afford to let him win this time. The weekend came too quickly. We were in a small cabin by the lake, far away from the noise of the town, and Jason was being everything I had hoped for. Attentive, considerate, almost loving. For a moment I allowed myself to relax. But when I woke up the next morning and saw Jason's laptop open on the desk, I couldn't stop myself from walking over. The screen was filled with spreadsheets, figures, projects, estate management, my father's legacy. I closed it before Jason came in, but my mind was already made up. This wasn't the reconciliation I had hoped for. This wasn't going to fix everything. And it would be the last time I let him get away with pretending it was. The weekend had done nothing to ease the tension between Jason and me. In fact, if anything, it had made the cracks more noticeable. We spent 2 days in that cabin, with Jason playing the part of the attentive husband, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was only trying to lull me into complacency. Every time I looked at him, I saw the same ambition, the same cold calculations. He wasn't worried about my father's legacy, he was worried about securing his future. By the time we returned home, I was on edge, walking a tightrope between holding on to my resolve and trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. I needed to do something about the estate, about the trust, about Jason's plans for everything my father had left behind. But I wasn't sure how. The next morning, I was jolted out of bed by a loud knock at the door. I glanced at the clock. It was barely 8 a.m. Who would be here this early? I made my way downstairs, already dreading the confrontation that I could feel was coming. I swung open the door, expecting to find a delivery person or perhaps one of the neighbors, but instead it was Clarice. She stood in the doorway, her sunglasses perched on her nose, despite the overcast sky, her heels clicking sharply against the wood as she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She was dressed in a sleek black coat, the kind you wear when you want to be taken seriously, but she didn't look like someone who cared about my father's death. She looked like someone who cared about getting what she wanted. I couldn't suppress the sigh that escaped my lips. "Clarice," I said, keeping my tone neutral, though I felt a wave of irritation rise in my chest. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, I'm just here to have a chat with you, darling," she said, smiling sweetly. But it didn't reach her eyes. I could feel the power play before she even opened her mouth. "You've had quite a bit to manage recently, haven't you? The funeral, the estate, everything. I thought we should talk about the next steps." I crossed my arms, taking a step back. "Next steps? What do you mean?" Her smile widened, and she pulled a chair out from the kitchen table, sitting down like she had every right to be there. "Well, darling, with your father gone, someone needs to look after things. The clinic, the house, the estate. It's all a little overwhelming for someone with no experience, don't you think?" Her words were like daggers wrapped in sugar. She was baiting me, testing my patience. I gritted my teeth. I'm handling things just fine. There's nothing to discuss. Oh, but there is, she said, leaning forward, her tone suddenly more serious. I think you need to understand the weight of what's on your shoulders. Your father's estate isn't just about his clinic or his house. It's about the people who rely on it. And let's be honest, Emma, you're not going to be able to keep things running on your own. Not without help. I felt my pulse quicken. Help? You mean your help? She didn't flinch, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Of course, darling. Jason and we have experience managing things like this. You're a veterinarian, I understand, but this is a completely different ballgame. You're not going to be able to do this by yourself. Jason's already made it clear he's handling everything. I snapped, my frustration bubbling over. I don't need your help, Clarice. And I don't need him to take over either. She chuckled softly, shaking her head like she was humoring a child. Oh honey, don't you see? Jason's already done the work. He's already figured out what's best for everyone. He's been making plans for the estate, for the house, and for the future. And let's be honest, he's been doing that because it's what's best for you as well. I couldn't stop the anger that surged through me. Best for me? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. You mean best for Jason? You mean best for you? Don't you dare try to pretend that you're doing this for me. This has always been about getting what you want. Clarice leaned back in her chair, unbothered by my outburst. You're being emotional, darling. You're grieving. I get it. But Jason and I are simply trying to protect what's left of your father's legacy. I don't think you're capable of managing it all on your own. You're too caught up in sentiment. I took a deep breath, trying to control the rising fury inside of me. You think I don't understand what's at stake? You think I don't know how important this clinic was to my father? To this town? It's not just a business, Clarice. It's his life's work. And I won't let you or Jason turn it into something it's not. She studied me for a moment, her gaze cold, calculating. Then she stood up slowly, fixing her sunglasses with deliberate slowness. Emma, she said softly, I'm just trying to help. But if you insist on being difficult, I'll have no choice but to take matters into my own hands. You don't want to go down that road, trust me. Let's see how long you last when you're all alone, sweetheart. Her words hung in the air, chilling the space between us. Before I could respond, she turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, shaken but resolute. I knew then that Clarice wasn't just after the clinic or the house. She was after control. And Jason? He was on her side. He was already thinking about how to split the inheritance, how to get what he wanted, all while pretending it was for me. The feeling of isolation crashed over me like a wave. My own husband, my own mother-in-law, they were conspiring behind my back, making plans that didn't include me. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wouldn't back down. I would protect my father's legacy, even if it meant standing against the people I thought I could trust. I immediately called Veronica. I'm moving forward, I said, my voice steely. We need to start the divorce proceedings. Veronica's voice was calm but supportive. I'll get started right away. You're doing the right thing, Emma. We'll protect you. As I hung up the phone, a sense of control surged within me. This wasn't just about the estate. This was about my life. And I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Jason or Clarice, take it away from me. I was done playing nice. It was time to fight for what was mine. The cafe was crowded, the buzz of conversation filling the air, but I was too focused on the folder in front of me to notice the chatter. Jason had no idea what was coming. He walked into the cafe, looking relaxed, his usual smug grin in place, as though everything was just another day, another plan to be executed. I sat at a corner table, hands folded in front of me, a mix of emotions swirling inside. Anger, hurt, fear, but most of all, resolve. I had spent so many days tiptoeing around Jason, trying to keep the peace, trying to make him understand. But he hadn't listened. Now it was my turn. He spotted me from across the room, his eyes lighting up with that characteristic eagerness I had once found endearing. He approached, his steps confident, the same air of control around him. Hey, Em, he said, dropping into the chair across from me, his voice warm, as though nothing was wrong. I've been thinking about everything. Maybe we can start fresh. No more fighting. We can figure out the estate stuff together. I know you don't want to sell everything, but we can compromise. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. I looked at him for a long moment, absorbing the words. Compromise. He thought I was still the same person who would back down, who would let him have his way. I gave a small nod, but it wasn't out of agreement. It was all part of the plan. I had one goal now, and I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. I'm glad you're ready to work with me, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. But before we move forward, I think we need to clear the air. I've been holding on to something, Jason. Something you need to know. He leaned forward, still unaware. What is it? We've been through a lot, but we'll get through it. I'm here for you. I slid the folder across the table toward him. You're going to want to read this, I said, my voice steady but firm. Jason blinked, momentarily confused. What's this? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I waited for him to open it, the silence between us growing thicker with every passing second. He hesitated, but finally he picked up the folder and flipped it open. It was as though the room around us faded into the background. His face went from confusion to disbelief, his eyes darting across the pages as the reality of what he was seeing sank in. I watched his face carefully. First it was shock, then anger, as the words seemed to pierce through his carefully constructed facade. There was no hiding from it now. He saw it. He knew what I knew. Jason slammed the folder shut, his knuckles white as he gripped the edges. What the hell is this, Emma? He hissed, his voice low and dangerously controlled. You're recording our conversations? You've been spying on me. I didn't flinch. I was done being intimidated. It's not spying, Jason, I replied calmly. It's called protecting myself. I've had enough of you gaslighting me, of you pretending like I don't know what you're trying to do. You've been planning this for months, using me, using my father's estate as your business project. Well, I'm done. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tight with rage. This is unbelievable. You're going to accuse me of what? You think I'm just trying to take over everything? I leaned in, keeping my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. Yes, Jason, that's exactly what I think. You've been plotting to take control of everything my father built, and you didn't think I'd notice? You've been selling me on the idea that we're in this together, that we're partners. But what you're really doing is taking advantage of me. You're taking advantage of my grief, my loyalty to my father's legacy. And you think I wouldn't see it? His hand balled into a fist, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out. But then he seemed to rein it in, his eyes flashing with something darker. You have no idea what's at stake here, Emma. I've been trying to help you, to help us both. You think I'm doing this for me? No, I'm doing it because you won't. I shook my head. Don't try to twist this, Jason. I'm not the one who doesn't get it. You've been so focused on controlling everything that you can't even see what's right in front of you. I never asked for your help to take over my father's clinic. I didn't need your help to sell the house, to turn everything into a business venture. I wanted to protect it, and I still do. Jason's face flushed with frustration. I've done everything for you, Emma. I've been patient with you, trying to make this work. And now you're throwing it all away over some misplaced sense of loyalty? You're being selfish. His words cut deeper than I wanted them to, but I stood my ground. No, Jason. You're the one who's been selfish. You never saw this for what it really was, did you? You never saw it as something that mattered to me, something that my father worked his whole life for. You saw it as a business opportunity. You never once asked me how I felt. You only asked yourself how much money you could make off it. Jason opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face was a mask of anger and disbelief, but I saw the flicker of something else, a glimmer of fear, maybe. Fear that he'd been caught, that I knew too much. Do you know what the worst part is? I continued, my voice cold but steady. The worst part is, you don't even seem to care. You're too busy worrying about renovations and selling off parts of this place to even think about why my father built it in the first place. You don't get it. You never will. For a long moment, Jason just stared at me, the tension between us thick and suffocating. But then he exhaled sharply, his face hardening into something unreadable. You're making a huge mistake, Emma, he finally said, his voice low, almost menacing. You think you can just walk away from this? You think you can cut me out of this and still have a life? You're wrong. I met his gaze, unflinching. I already have a life, Jason. And I don't need you in it to protect what matters to me. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the cafe as he left, leaving me sitting there, the weight of everything settling around me. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I'd won. But I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. And for the first time since my father's death, I felt like I was finally in control of my own life. The silence that followed Jason's departure from the cafe was like a weight lifting off my chest. I sat there for a few minutes, letting the feeling of freedom wash over me, mingled with something more powerful, clarity. I had finally done it. I had stood up for myself, for my father's legacy, and I was done letting anyone, especially Jason, control my life. As I drove back home, I could feel the shift within me. The decision to start the divorce proceedings wasn't just about ending my marriage. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, about taking ownership of my father's estate and my own future. It wasn't easy, and it never would be, but it felt right. When I walked into the house, everything felt different. The air was heavy with the aftermath of everything that had happened. Jason's absence, the looming legal battles ahead, and the weight of my choices. But it wasn't the suffocating weight it once was. It was a weight I could carry. I went straight to my father's study and shut the door behind me. There was something peaceful about being here, surrounded by his things, his old leather chair, the framed photos of his patients, the worn bookshelves. It was still his space, but it felt like mine now. My hands ran over the smooth surface of his desk, and I found myself sitting down, looking over the papers that had been left for me. The inheritance documents, the trust paperwork, the estate plans. Everything my father had carefully crafted, everything I had to protect. I took a deep breath and reached for my phone. I was ready to make things official. I dialed Veronica's number, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. Emma, she answered quickly. Is everything okay? I'm ready to move forward, I said, my voice steady. Let's start the divorce proceedings. I want everything to be in motion as soon as possible. I don't need Jason or Clarice involved in the estate anymore. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, but then Veronica spoke with her usual calm assurance. I'll get everything lined up for you, Emma. You're making the right decision. I'll handle it from here. After hanging up with Veronica, I sat back in my father's chair, taking a moment to let everything settle. There was so much to process, but the weight of the decisions I had made already felt lighter. I wasn't alone in this anymore, and I wasn't about to let anyone tear me down. The following days were a blur of phone calls, meetings with Veronica, and finally, the physical act of reclaiming my life. I changed the locks on the doors, updated all the security systems, and started putting everything in motion to take control of the clinic. I hired a property manager to oversee renovations on the house, making sure everything was done carefully and in line with my father's wishes. It wasn't about turning a profit. It was about preserving his work, about keeping the clinic a place for the town to rely on, just as it had been for decades. A few days later, I decided to take another step. I didn't need Jason or Clarice's approval for what I was doing, but there was one thing I had to do. I needed to make a public statement. I needed to stand tall, in front of the town, in front of everyone who had known my father, and everyone who thought they could take advantage of me, and let them know that I was here to stay. I drove to the clinic, the one my father had built with his bare hands, and stood outside, looking at the brick facade, the windows, the sign that had hung there for so many years. It was more than just a building. It was a legacy. I walked in, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the familiar faces of the staff, the ones who had been there for years. They greeted me with smiles, and I could see the concern in their eyes. They knew the tension. They had seen it all. We're with you, Emma, one of the nurses, Linda, said as she came up to me. You're doing the right thing. I smiled, feeling the support that had always been here, but was now more important than ever. Thank you, I said quietly. I won't let this place fall apart. The days following my decision were long and filled with details, setting up meetings with attorneys, starting the legal process of the divorce, meeting with property managers to discuss renovations for the house. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments where I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But I never wavered for long. And then one morning, as I was reviewing documents in my office, I received an email. The subject line read, "Town Hall Meeting, Important Announcement Regarding the Clinic." I clicked it open, my heart racing. It was an invitation for a public meeting with the town council, where I would be formally announcing my intentions to keep the clinic open, to preserve it as a community resource, and to make sure it continued in the spirit my father had envisioned. The town had always relied on my father's clinic, and now, it was time for me to make sure they knew it wasn't going anywhere. I quickly confirmed my attendance. This was it. This was the final step in my reclamation. The night of the meeting arrived, and I stood before the town's leaders, the community members, and the old faces who had known my father for years. As I spoke about the clinic's future, about how I would preserve the integrity of everything my father had built, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Empowerment. I could do this. And I would. By the time I finished speaking, the room was silent, but it wasn't a heavy silence. It was one of understanding, of acceptance. I was no longer just the daughter of the beloved town doctor. I was Emma, the one who would keep his legacy alive. As I left the meeting that night, I felt the town's support behind me. No one was trying to tear me down. No one was questioning my decisions anymore. This was my future. The next morning, I changed the locks for good. I hired a new manager for the clinic, someone who had my father's values at heart, and started overseeing the renovations myself. I began to take the steps necessary to move forward, to rebuild, not just the clinic, but my own life. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. And it wasn't because of the money or the estate. It was because I had reclaimed what was rightfully mine. My father's legacy, my own strength, and the future I was building for myself. The town began to rally around me, whispering truths they'd noticed all along about Jason and Clarice. For the first time, I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat. I had won, and I had done it on my own. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. And for the first time in years, I was at peace.